If you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, you may have heard of the movie Sudden Death, a 1995 action movie that heavily incorporates the team into its story. The movie takes place during a Stanley Cup Final game between the Penguins and Chicago Blackhawks at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. It was filmed on location and features several cameos from members of the Penguins organization and infamously has a fight scene with the Penguins mascot Iceberg. Today, I want to watch this movie 30 years after its theatrical release and view it from the lens of a diehard Pittsburgh Penguins fan living in 2025. I've seen the film before, but this time we can watch it together and I can review it. Here's the official plot summary of the movie. Darren McCord, a fire marshal of the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, finds himself in a race against time to save his daughter, the vice president, in a crowded stadium when terrorists take over an NHL Stanley Cup game. Now, this movie obviously took inspiration from Die Hard, which came out in 1988. It's pretty much just a crappy version of that in the 90s, and I wouldn't really care about this movie if it didn't have any Penguins elements. It currently has a 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb, and Owen Krebs gave it a 5 out of 10 as a movie. A big part of why this movie was made specifically at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh was because of the Civic Arena's famous retractable roof. That was used in the final action set piece and is what director Peter Hymas originally pitched to then Penguins owner Howard Baldwin and his wife at the time. Filming naturally happened in 1994, which was also the year that the lockout shortened the 94-95 NHL season. The film, being a fictional piece of media, is not directly accurate to the Penguins, which of course is expected. The Penguins did not go to the Stanley Cup Final, obviously, in 1995. They did play the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup Final, but that was in 1992. There are also players on this fictional version of the Penguins that were not on the team in 1992, such as Luc Robitaille. And there's also a bunch of fully fictional movie-created characters, such as goaltender Brad Tolliver, who's played by Jay Caulfield. Also, for some of the background shots of players in the movie, just shots of hockey players hockeying, the movie used footage of a scrimmage between the Johnstown Chiefs and Wheeling Thunderbirds, now the Wheeling Nailers, the Penguins' ECHL affiliate. Anyways, let's act like new rock stars, and we'll go through this movie and point out some key details and Easter eggs. Now, I'm assuming most of you guys don't want to actually watch this movie, so I'm going to be going over what happens beat by beat in the story, so full spoilers will be in effect here if you actually do want to watch it. First off, the whole premise of this movie is surrounded on the vice president is going to be in attendance, and terrorists take over his suite, kidnap and hold him hostage for money, I guess. I don't know. I just watched it like 10 minutes ago, and I can't tell you what they were really after. The vice president in this movie is a completely made-up character, but in real life, the vice president at the time was Al Gore. We follow Darren McCord, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, who is an on-site firefighter for the Civic Arena, working the game, but he also takes his two kids to the game, which was allowed for some reason. I don't know. Most of the scenes before puck drop are what you would expect. We get a lot of scenes of the terrorists just preparing their plan and sneaking into the game through pre-9/11 security. We also get a scene of our main character picking up his kids for the game. It's implied that he divorced his wife and there's a separation thing. The mom is all mad that Jean-Claude is taking him to the game, but she's got to realize this is Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, and they're getting free tickets. Yes, please. We also get a couple scenes where you get to go in the Penguins' locker room. Jean-Claude takes his kid in there just to visit players. Keep in mind, this is before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. This is a thing that happens in the NHL, but before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, I'm not sure this would happen here. They also allow the vice president in the locker room. He kind of gives them like a pre-game speech. Again, this is something that sort of happens in real life, but I don't think it would ever happen in the NHL. Like, obviously, it would make more sense to do it for an international hockey event. The players even say they're mostly Canadian. Like, okay, why is the American president here? Whatever. This character, who I guess is supposed to be Ulf Samuelsson, but isn't played by Ulf Samuelsson, is also just butt-ass naked in the scene where the vice president's in the room with them. Then our characters actually sit down for the game, but Jean-Claude keeps having to leave because he's still, like, working the game. This is totally a conflict of interest. Then the puck drops, and we get a lot of cameos in this movie, and again, this is the main reason why I'm here as a Penguins fan. Let's go over a bunch of them in a lightning round. Jeff Jimerson sings the national anthem and plays himself. John Barbero, who was the Penguins' former PA announcer at the time, plays himself and does some PA announcing. Mike Lang and Paul Staggerwald are probably the two biggest cameos. They get a lot of lines, given that Mike Lang especially calls this fictional game and gives us a rundown of what's happening on the ice. Rest in peace, Mike. Bill Clement also has a cameo as a pregame announcer. And then in terms of players, Jay Caulfield plays Brad Tolliver, the fictional starting goaltender who does have some plot relevance. Ian Moran, former Penguins player, is in this movie, but he's actually playing one of the Blackhawks players, specifically Chris Chelios. I just watched the movie. I didn't really catch this, but this was listed in the IMDb page and on the Wikipedia page, so I guess that was intended to be a reference. Pat Brisson, who is famously Sidney Crosby's agent, is also a player. And then Luc Robitaille, Bernie Nichols, Marcus Naslund, and Ken Reggett all play themselves. And Mark Kachowski, who is a short-lived Penguins player, plays a character named Beaumont. They also, of course, use a lot of player names. Kevin Stevens scores the first goal for the Penguins in this, fictional movie game, but he's not played himself. They did get the goal song correct. This was the Penguins' goal song at the time. Paul Staggerwald seems thrilled by the first goal of the Stanley Cup Final, Game 7, whatever. And the Blackhawks tie it with Dirk Graham scoring, again, a real player, but he wasn't played by himself. While all of this is happening, the main plot of the movie is happening, our villain of the movie, Joshua Foss, who's played by Powers Booth, I'm just going to call him Powers Booth, he takes over the vice president's suite, he starts shooting people, and he's demanding money, blah, blah, blah. At the end of every period, he ends up killing more and more people for however long they don't give him money or whatever. Then we get all the scenes with Iceberg. This movie is rated R for a reason. There's like an old lady gets murdered in one of the first scenes. Then in this scene, Iceberg shoots a guy or a girl in the bathroom in front of Jean-Claude's daughter. And then since she saw it, she kidnaps her. So she can't tell anyone, I guess. So Jean-Claude is then thrust into action as he now has to rescue his daughter. Iceberg kills another person at an elevator. She calls him a jerk-off right before he shoots him, and I can't help to think that this is a total missed opportunity that she didn't call him a jag-off instead. Then the kitchen scene happens again with Iceberg, and then that's probably the most famous part of this movie. But what's not as popular is the scene where Iceberg just gets thrown into like a meat crusher and gets brutally murdered. Anyways, back on the ice, in the second period, Jeff Shantz, real former player for the Blackhawks, scores, and then Thomas Sandstrom, former Penguins player, ties it at 2. Again, I know most of the stuff on the ice is clearly not the main focus of this movie, but again, it's the only reason I'm here. Most of the scenes in the second is just Jean-Claude investigating more and then like talking to the FBI. Helicopters begin to fly over the arena to try and like extract the vice president, I guess. Again, that's part of the reason why they wanted the Civic Arena, so that they have the retractable roof so you can have like cool action set pieces with it. At this point, the bombs are just going off in the parking lot and helicopters are getting shot down. There's a guy with a rocket launcher who like shoots a scoreboard outside. You'd have to think, even, before cell phones and all that, the game would be stopped by now and the arena would be evacuated. Like 30 people are dead at this point. But no, it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. We still got a tie game going into the third period. Jean-Claude gets on the phone and does the classic "I'm coming for you" speech to Powers Booth, and then the terrorists start chasing him. They chase him into the Penguins' locker room, which will be important later. Ron Francis gives the Penguins a late lead at 3-2, and then Brent Sutter ties it at 3. Bernie Nichols, who actually did play himself in this movie, scored to make it 4-3 Blackhawks. Here's probably my favorite part of the movie here. All throughout the movie, we keep learning how Tolliver, who is the goalie that's being played by Jay Caulfield, had like a high temperature and was sick. It's never really explained like why he was sick. It's just, I guess he was sick. So he goes to the locker room in the third period, takes him out of the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, for Pete's sake. And Ken Reggett, who was played by Ken Reggett in this movie, goes in. But then like 5 minutes later, Tolliver comes back onto the ice and says, "No, I'm fine," or whatever. But it's actually Jean-Claude underneath all the equipment. And it turns out, in an attempt to like run away from terrorists or whatever, Jean-Claude thought it would be a good idea to put on all of the goalie equipment. Okay, maybe. But then why would he? And then he goes back on the ice. Yeah. And then the Penguins coach, who's a fictional coach or whatever, Eddie Johnson was the Penguins' real-life coach at that time. The coach was like, well, you're our best goalie, so get in there. And yeah, this is really happening. Jean-Claude Van Damme, or whatever his character's name is dressed up as a different goaltender, playing in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final on home ice, down 4-3, while terrorists have bombs rigged around the arena, and many people, including the Vice President of the United States, are being kidnapped and held hostage. This movie is insane. Doing his best David Ayres impression, though, Jean-Claude makes like a huge save on Tony Amonte and then like uses sign language to tell his kid in the crowd that it was him. Then he sucker punches a guy so that he can leave the game. What was his plan here? So the Penguins are down 4-3, and they have to play shorthanded because a stranger, a random civilian, got onto the ice and sucker punched a guy. But since it's a movie, of course, they tie it up. Luc Robitaille sends it to overtime, and they make a bunch of jokes and like puns. Sudden death. Oh, sudden death. That's the name of the movie. Then Jean-Claude, like, I guess, gets out of goalie equipment, and we're off the rails here, so we're just going to wrap up the movie. The roof begins to retract, and Jean-Claude naturally just then throws one of the terrorists into the freaking scoreboard, and it explodes. And then, finally, people start to realize, oh, maybe it's not safe to be here right now. The game is paused, but Jean-Claude then just turns into Spider-Man, I guess, and, like, swings on, like, all of these, like, Raptor equipment things and lights, goes into the suite where the hostages are being held, rescues his daughter. Powers Booth escapes, but then he tries to like go off in a helicopter. He starts detonating some of the bombs, but then the helicopter crashes into the ice because Jean-Claude shot the driver, and he crashes into the ice and he freaking dies. So the day is saved, like 50 people died. And we never get to see the end of the game itself. This movie is batshit crazy. Even without the Penguin stuff, there's just so much chaos here, and you really have to suspend a lot of your belief to enjoy the movie. Yeah, it's insane. Again, I'm really only here for the Penguin stuff, which I felt was handled decently. Like, they did a decent job accurately portraying hockey, and they did their research, but it's just crazy that, like, Iceberg shot some people in this movie. The Penguins signed off on that happening. Could you imagine that happening today? Yeah, this is just an odd piece of media and a real product of its time. I'm not sure if we should forget about it. I mean, I'm making a video to kind of shine light on it, but it's definitely something that, I don't know, doesn't really need to exist. I don't know. Lastly, there was like a 2020 Netflix sequel called Welcome to Sudden Death. That's like a reboot or retelling of the original movie, but this time it's in the NBA. I ain't watching that one. Let me know your thoughts on this movie if you've never heard of it before. Let me know your thoughts on this movie if you have seen it before. And like, comment, subscribe for more Penguins content. Thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.